Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this 50 Acres Academy. If you can hear a little noise in the background, it's my puppy who was in hospital yesterday he'd swallowed a large dog treat that he shouldn't have done. So my apologies if you hear him making a little bit of noise. He's very tiny. He's 1.4 kilos and he's a Yorkshire Terrier. So he's inside wandering around. But good morning. Please let us know if you've got any questions throughout the webinar. There's a question section on the control panel that you can jot your questions into at any stage, and I'll get to those as I see them. Otherwise, delighted to have you here, so thank you so much for joining us. We have these each month towards the end of the month on different topics. And today's webinar is about creating standout content. So when we're talking about creating standout content, we're really talking about, for my purposes, for the description for this particular webinar, we're talking about online content, obviously. That's really what I'm pivoting at about today. So there's lots of other content you can write. You can write, collateral or mini releases or whatever else, and we've done webinars on those. But for the purposes of today, it's really content and content marketing and promotion of content that we're talking about today. So just so that you have that in your mind. So what we're going to cover today, the basics of where to start across a range of platforms, understanding how to scale your networks and respond to your metrics and data, understand what those are, and how to look for and understand high-level trends so that you can make smarter, creative and promotion decisions about what you're doing. So that's essentially what we're going to be covering today. And we should be finished by, I would think, 11:45. Might be a bit after, a bit before, depending on how many questions we have. So creating content that converts, is all about being clear about who your organisation or your business services and what their needs are. You can't create content for them unless you know who you're talking to and what their needs are, what are their problems, and we'll drill down into the issue about the problems in a moment. But you need to have an understanding of your audience rather than just sort of writing scattergun or creating content in a scattergun approach, and I think we probably all know that. So then the next step is to create useful content that gets people into the funnel or the conduit, getting them through into being converted. So if you're in case of a not-for-profit, a donor, a customer, if you're a business or part of your tribe in whatever way that you get them involved with whatever you're doing. It might just be that you're an individual with opinions and you're doing a blog. Most of you listening will probably be part of a not-for-profit or an organisation, but there might be others of you who are doing other things. So it's really about getting them to be part of your world in some way. So let's just talk about how we might do that. So where to start? Now, it's about setting goals, and that's meant to be goalposts there, creative image. So it's about setting goals, essentially, and, how do you do that? Let's have a think about that. So, the top tip, I suppose, to start off with before you head out on creating any online content, and for the purposes of much of today's discussion, will be thinking about blogs. But, let's just think about it in a general sense. In some respects, you sort of, yes, you can have brand awareness, but if it's, you and a small group of people in a room and you don't really have brand awareness, where do you start? You're not a major brand, you're not a major not-for-profit. Where do you actually start? How do you get to be in a position where you actually can create brand awareness? It's a sort of a difficult chicken and egg situation in some respects. So in my mind, you really need to think about creating a really great destination, service or a vision or whatever it is, and reaching the people that will actually take action or engage with you. So unless you reach the people, unless you've got something that they want, you're never going to be in a position to create brand awareness. You're never going to be able to create a group of people or a tribe to want to support you and follow you. So it is a chicken and the egg situation, but you've really got to have that destination. You've really got to have that content and the vision that underlies that before you do anything else. And then you need to reach the people who will respond to it. And by virtue of doing all of that, then you then create the tribe and the brand awareness over time. So your stakeholders really will be your biggest advocates. They're the ones that will be proselytizing for you. They're the ones that will be retweeting, reposting, talking about you on social media. They're the ones that will be generating that support. And so there's your brand awareness. It's when you reach those people that you with that content, they become your supporters. So organisations, some of the key content facts. Organisations with active blogs receive more engagement than those that don't. Pretty obvious in many respects. So that's why I'm wanting to talk to you about blogs today. The majority of stakeholders feel better about and are more likely to engage with, so there should be engaged with in there, with organisation that delivers custom content to them. So, it's not necessarily about just a one-size-fits-all situation. You might have different stakeholders or different parts of your tribe who will respond to different things. And, some of them want, a basic how-to list or guide about a service or something that you can give them. Others want more high-level policy analysis or some sort of more deeper intellectual analysis about a particular issue. So, different content will appeal to different people, and you need to make sure that those people actually know that it's there rather than just sort of shooting it out. So, you might like to tell certain select groups that you've got something there for them. If you know that if you've got a group of academics who are interested in the space that you're in and you're providing them with some intellectual analysis that might be contributing to a discussion, let those academics know that you're there, even if they've not subscribed to your newsletter. Let them know via Twitter. Let them know via email that you're actually doing some of this work. If you're doing practical stuff that again might be of interest to someone else in the sector or a particular group, let them know as well by Twitter. You can either do that individually, you can advertise, you can do a whole bunch of stuff to let them know that it's there. So, it's a well-known fact that, if you want to reach a significant amount of people, 8 out of 10 internet users, then you'll need to use social media and blogging. It just won't happen if you just sit there in isolation and don't tell anyone else. You can put stuff on the internet, but if it's not searchable, if it's not promoted, if it's not conveyed in conversations and in other ways, then the odds are, yes, it might be searched and found selectively on Google, but you really won't be found. So you've got to use outreach to do that, and we'll talk a bit about the promotion in a little while. Most content marketing experts believe that custom media and content represents the future of marketing, and what I meant by that is what I talked about before. It's about selective use. It's what I do now. It's what we do increasingly for media pitches, and I talked about this in a great detail in the boot camp that I just finished last week, which is that we don't just send out a media release. So many times I'm speaking to a client who goes, well, we'll just send out a media release. And it's good to have a media release written, but I actually think that people are over it. I often say that, my husband, who works in the press gallery here in Parliament House, is a photographer. He always has over 800 unopened emails in his inbox from people. And inevitably what's there is attached is media releases, and they're never read. And so I think what is read increasingly is people getting individual emails or individual custom content given to them in their inbox, um, so that it's a personal thing, it's written to them, or it appears that it's written to them. And the same with content, it's the same thing. People need to know that they've been, you've thought about them before you send them something, whether that's a pitch for a story or whether that's content that you're sending them. It's the same thing, really, in some respects. So this is the funnel. How do you then get people from, you've got your vision, you determined your goals, you've got an objective, you created a destination, uh, whatever that is, and we'll talk a little bit about blogs in more detail in a few moments. But what the idea really is to get them in the funnel of taking action with that content. So it's not just content that's out there and you're going, isn't this great? It's like, going out and giving out, standing in George Street in Sydney and giving out free expensive things. What's the point? You don't know who these people are, unless you're an incredibly, huge brand with great, huge market penetration. It's a really hit and miss exercise. So, how do you funnel those people selectively through into your site and get them to take action, get them to sign up, get them to donate, get them to commit, get them to participate, get them to be a customer, whatever it is that you're trying to get them to do. That's the objective ultimately with content. It's not just doing it for the good of your health. Sometimes it is, but ultimately you do want something out of it. It's a two-way process that you're doing it. Yes, you're providing information often, but it's also to increase those people, the likelihood that they're participating in your organisation, they're becoming part of your tribe ultimately. So how do you do that? First of all, you need to define what your funnel is. Having a clear goal for your content is really good. It's excellent. We've talked about the goals, we talked about the vision. But assuming you know who your ideal stakeholder actually is, or there might be a number of them if you had to describe them, how do you get people from being a basic website visitor to a donor or a customer or key stakeholder? That's what you need to be able to do. Think about what your stakeholder is. I wrote a book with Melissa Doyle a few years ago, and she used to talk about how their classic, this was 7 years ago, how their classic, the qualitative research had established a viewer called Betty Blacktown. And that was in the back of their mind. It was Betty in Blacktown who was sitting down to watch them. That was one of their viewers, and they were thinking about her when they were creating content for their program. Likewise, you need to be able to create in your mind who those stakeholders might be. You need to visualize those people, or perhaps give them personas in some way, so that you can create content that will work for them rather than just creating content that works for you. If you can create content that might work for your Betty Blacktowns or your, John from Jerrabombra or your, Edward from Edgecliff, whoever it is, you have a vision of what they are. Are they hipsters? Are they elderly? Are they young people? Are they professionals? Are they whatever they are? What do they look like? What do they do? What are they interested in? You don't have to really, create a sort of a three-dimensional persona, but in your mind's eye, have an idea of who these people are, so that you can then write for them, talk to them in many respects, and perhaps that's you and your team talking about what those people are and what they might like. But it's really key to be able to help that transmission from just being a visitor to being a participant. Being someone who is just a statistic on your metrics and on your analytics, through to, seeing that person translate to a list of donors, seeing them translating to a list, where they're a customer and they're paying you money, or that they become someone who you reach out to and meet with or engage with in a campaign situation, etc., etc. So it's about making them truly part of your world, which is the objective of what we're doing. Otherwise, we may as well just all pack up and go home, really, and because ultimately this stuff is for a purpose, and we need to remember that. So, what about the vision? We talked about the vision before, and that's very, very important as well. So, this is important because your goal is to create great content that helps solve the problems of your stakeholders, your donors, your customers, or whoever they are that they may have, whatever that is. Problems might not be a problem; it might just be something that you can do to help them. But you are providing them with something that they want. So in effect, that is a problem. You are solving a hole. You're filling a hole. You're filling a vacuum. You're adding to their life in some respects. So it's important to pick a direction for your blog or a vision, that you're going to take it in. And a top tip that I always think about is, look at what successful companies or organizations in your sector or industry are doing and find the gaps in their approach. You may need to adapt your strategy to either widen it or to scale it back to a much more focused approach, depending on what you think is necessary and what will work. Define your parameters and determine some potential blog categories. So again, it's not about being hit and miss and scattergun and going, I'll just write anything and it'll just be whatever we can fit, whatever we think about. For the purposes of my blog and my content marketing strategy, we do a couple of things. We put stuff on our own blog, but I also write content for a number of other websites that are pretty high profile, like Smart Company, Inside Small Business, a number of other ones, and as well as not-for-profit sites, a whole bunch of stuff. And as I talked in earlier webinars, my objective is, if I can, not to pay for content, sponsored content, if I can avoid it, because and we'll talk about this in a moment in terms of offering your content to other locations and other sites, but everyone needs content, and so if you can get into a bartering situation where you're providing content to someone, they provide content back to you, all of that good stuff comes back to you in the end, and it sort of keeps the wheels spinning around, which is useful. So that's really where you take your vision. You've determined your goal, you're looking at the vision, you're looking at the direction that you want to take your content in, or your blog or your website or whatever it is. More often than not, it's a blog, or blogs of where you put that content. So creating content topics, this springs directly from your vision. So you start with the problems that you want to solve, and you be as specific as you possibly can. So we're talking about, what are the holes you're filling? What are the gaps you're going to be answering? What are the questions you're responding to? What are the services you're providing? Whatever it is, they're the problems. They're the things you're doing. They're your actions. There are lots of ways to do it. Like, this is how you can come up with some of this stuff. You can listen to people at events. You can listen to panel discussions. You can read comments in blogs and forums. You can hang out on Twitter and Facebook, or you can survey your website visitors to find out, pick up on some of that stuff. What are people wanting to hear about in your space? And you need to go out and find what that is. When you come up with some blog ideas or blog categories, you enter them into Google AdWords, into their keyword tool, and then you'll uncover some really common search terms within those categories, some other ones that will spring out to you, and that might give you some other ideas for some other blog categories as well, which is something food for thought in terms of other directions you might like to head. What are some of the common actual problems that people might, reactions or problems that you have in terms of the functionality of getting all this working? When you start this, process. You've got, you've established your objectives and your goals, and you've got your vision. You've got an idea of the areas that you want to create content in. You start this stuff, and then you're going, well, I just don't have anything, or don't have as much action as I anticipated. And these are some of those common problems. So some of them might be, we're not getting enough signups to our newsletter, website, action list campaign. People are unsubscribing from our list. We don't know what content to email people is one of the things that people wonder about. We don't know how to tag people or to only receive information that's relevant for them. And we don't know how to leverage Twitter well enough. I mean, you can leverage Twitter to help you test titles, experimenting with different variations. You can either do that from promoted content or ads, or you can just try various words in tweets and see see what the response is. Ads are often really good to be able to test those things, just to be able to get a sense of what ads work best. And that'll give you some really good benchmarks in terms of what words work well for titles and content. Not everyone wants to spend money on ads, but if you can even test them for a little bit, I think that's often very useful as well. So coming up with creative titles is really important. To get people's attention, you need to get more people to click the title and read the post. So how do you actually do that? Here are some things to keep in mind when you're doing that. You need to create intrigue, be cryptic. So it's not just about sort of telling them exactly what it is. I mean, often you see there is media that is pretty, content that is pretty flat and pretty ordinary. How do you create something that is actually a bit beyond ordinary? It's about creating some interesting stuff, which is going to grab people's attention and get them involved in what's going on. Just hang on a second, everyone. I'm sorry. I've just got to move one dog away from another before it massacres it. Sorry, I've just got a sick puppy in my house and another dog trying to murder the other one. Sorry for the interruption. Address a specific problem or issue for your readers and provide a solution. That's a really good thing to do. And sorry, I've just got this dog running around trying to murder the other one. If it starts murdering it, then I'll intervene. Sure, it's relevant to what your stakeholders or readers expect from you. Learn what works, like simple and direct, or exciting, interesting, controversial, sensational. But make sure, that it's believable. You can't just make something controversial or sensational all the time, because it doesn't always work with your brand or with what you're trying to achieve. If I, quite frankly, what I do doesn't always lend itself to the sensational. I work in communications. I'm talking to people about content. It's sometimes it's exciting, sometimes it's informative by and large. It's not really sensational. So, but then there are some who work in industries where you're working in more creative industries, acting or music or whatever it is, where stuff is more exciting, and you can talk in a more creative, exciting way. I think mixing up is important, but it's got to be believable, and it can't. You fundamentally don't sound like you're talking yourself up, or don't come across as a jerk or a bit of an idiot, because people will see through that. Use powerful, direct and definitive language to engage with the audience. I think it's important. And numbers, lists and data all work really well. Not too much of it, but lists of, checklists, top 3 tips, top 10 things to do, we all know that people are attracted to that because you go, I'm going to read that post because in reading these 5 tips will solve my problem. I will know more about that when I've read this post. And it's a really clear way of telling people that in this post you've got an answer to whatever it is that you're providing. Data, is another case in point. I mean, I've just spent some time this week with some academics, or last week with some academics, talking to them about how to present some data in a presentation to people. And, we were workshopping extensively last week about how to make that data work in an exciting way. And, where we got to with that and some of the ideas that I was sharing with them was to say, ultimately data is about people. Unless you're, doing pure maths for some reason, if you are, good on you. But unless you're a pure mathematician, data is about people. Data tells a story. And, when you're trying to explain a story using data, there is ways and means of doing that rather than just endlessly. Sorry, someone's just asked a question. I'll just respond to this. Sorry. I'll just come back to that in just 1 second, Julie. I'll just finish this point. Data, it tells a narrative. And, I think rather than just going endless bar charts, even in a blog post where, you're trying to illustrate a point, use a pie chart or use one figure, up 32%, or whatever it is, a picture that says, more people are, fatter than ever before, or more people are eating bad food, or whatever they're doing. You can demonstrate that statistic or that data in lots of different ways rather than just purely quoting those figures in a sort of a boring and flat way. And I think you need to think about how you do that, both in tweets, in Facebook posts, online on your blog. It's really important to make sure that that data is part of all those lists, and those numbers are part of your narrative and part of your story. So Julie's just asked me a question. Do you think the whole top tips, 5 reasons, blah, blah, blah approach is reaching saturation point? Well, I don't know that it is. Sometimes we feel like that more than others because we're so involved in content and see so much of it. Yeah, I mean, depending on what you do, Julie, yes, but I still, I subscribe to all sorts of things, and I subscribe to beauty blogs and food blogs and, all sorts of blogs, communications blogs, all sorts of stuff. And I'll often, I think, click on lists, the top 20 summer lipsticks, or, 10 haircuts for summer, or whatever it is, or 5 simple meals to feed your kids. I'm attracted to those things. I don't read them all, but I suppose in my mind it's neat. It neatens that information delivery in my mind. And so I'm thinking, okay, I only have to read 5 things, and that's probably subliminally maybe what I'm thinking. You don't have to do it every time you talk. There is so many different ways of communicating things, but it's an option. It's certainly an option, and I would include it in part of the bevy of what you're doing, if it works for you, depending on what it is that you're trying to communicate, I would think. But again, if it's something that you think you're over, or your audience is over, and you've got feedback, or you just sense that, then move away from it and just use something else. And use keywords that resonate with your audience. There's no point in making stuff too technical or alienating, because if you do, people go, oh, what's this? Keywords are simple words that people understand and they respond to, and they make sense to them. They know what they mean. Content marketing, SEO, whatever those keywords are, yes, they're jargon sometimes. Yes, they're repetitive, but they're words and things that people respond to. But as well as that, they do get search, um, you know, bonus points in terms of getting Google results for you, which is important. So creating content. So be original. We've just talked about using data. Use data but creatively and making sure it's part of your narrative. If you can do some original research, that's great. You may not be able to do that. Write some original thought, whatever you can do. Long content, as probably most of you know, works best for SEO purposes and general engagement. But quality is more important than quantity. So, don't, feel like you have to have lots and lots of words in there and fill it up if you don't have stuff to say. Leverage authority. Talk about other opinion formers. And we've talked about, the last webinar we talked about influencers and how to engage them, and that really ties in here in very many respects. Opinion formers are influencers. They're people out there, and if you think about it, I always say this in recent times. If you think about your day, and I don't know how old you all are that are listening, but I can remember a time when I actually got a newspaper delivered to my house. My husband works in a newspaper. It's the only job he's ever done. And when he first started, he's not that old. He's in his 40s, early 40s. When he first started, he took photos on a camera with film, and he would have to fly film back from Canberra if there was a prime ministerial challenge, because it was the quickest way of getting the photo back to the paper. Unbelievable, not that long ago. And it certainly was last century, but not that long ago. In the time that we've all been around, we're now doing everything digitally. He's got a whole setup. He's in person time, be there today, and he'll be transmitting stuff instantly onto the Sydney Morning Herald and Age website. It just goes straight up, and live stuff from the chamber. So it really has changed. And if you think now about how you're getting your inputs every day, I'm certainly not getting them from a newspaper. We don't get newspapers delivered. We read them online. We subscribe, but we don't get them delivered. We live just outside of we don't live in a city. So, I'm getting my inputs from Instagram, from, influencers on Instagram, influencers on blogs, people on online sites, YouTube. I read something recently which talked about, the day of these significant campaigns for makeup and cosmetics and perfume have gone, where you have a celebrity endorsement and that's it, and you've won the day if you get the supermodel. Or whoever, or the Hollywood actor or actress to endorse your product. People actually now look to YouTube bloggers and Instagram sites for verification about products. And so we are now getting our stuff from a whole variety of sources. If you think about across your day where you're getting your content from, it's from an extraordinary array of things. So you need to reach out to these people. You need to have them as part of your tribe. And how do you do that? These are, reaching out to these opinion formers or these influencers to get them to be part of what you're doing, your conversation, getting them to write for your blog, you write for theirs, or at least even if they just, get them to make a comment. It's really, really, really helpful. It just helps that sort of keeps the wheels turning effectively and keeps people moving from one site to another, to yours hopefully, and that's what you want. Use original high quality information or infographics, and I'm sure we all know about infographics, but they're brilliant. Don't use clip art. Don't make it look like it's a 1990s PowerPoint presentation. Really important. Make it professional. Have visuals that tell a narrative, not just improve how it looks. So it's not about just having some sort of, rubbishy little graphic there. If you can get it done professionally, or if you don't have the skills in-house, if you can afford it, you can subscribe to photo websites. I subscribe to one called 123F, and there's lots of these photo websites where you can just download photos pretty cheaply. There's lots of free ones as well. You can get hold of. If you make it usable, you can reduce your unsubscribes. So make the content practical. Make it something that people want. Make it something that people want to share or that they want to file away. I've got a file in my computer in my inbox, to read. I don't always. I'm sure there's more stuff in there than I may get to next week, but you want people to want to read what you're giving them, and that's important. It needs to be usable for them. If you provide visitors or your tribe with something that they can really use, they'll remember you as a trusted resource, this trusted source. You'll become part of their community. You link to other content. You don't know everything yourself, but provided, if you can prove you've done the research by linking to others, so that, again, if it's in a sort of policy area or it's in a not-for-profit space or it's in an organisation or industry space, proving that you understand the space, I think, is really important as well, and that's what you can do by linking to content. How to get people to opt into your content. There's a whole lot of ways in terms of on a blog or, emails, etc. There's a variety of ways. We'll just explore these for a second, but there's lots of ways. And if you have a web design, they'll come up with some other suggestions, I'm sure. Some of these are these sidebar, the most popular place for an opt-in box, but it can be forgotten once people scroll down the page beneath the fold, that, as people call it. A pop-up, that's particularly aggressive. We've all gone on websites where it pops up and says, would you like to subscribe to my newsletter? Sometimes you subscribe, does generate conversions, depends on who you are and what you test it out, see whether it's something that works for you. A scroll box slides up from the right or somewhere as someone scrolls through your post. It's less intrusive and it converts usually very well. A hello bar, which runs on the top of the site. It's great for promotion, but it also kills the design sort of sensibilities of your site. So you need to use that sparingly in particular times where you're perhaps promoting a campaign or perhaps promoting something that you want people to be actively engaged in. Post signature. After every post, it's a great place to put an email opt-in to be part of your subscription or newsletters as well. I do it on my signature. My email signature block has, if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, every one of my staff have the same thing. So, there's lots of different ways that you can think about having people engaged with your newsletter. Consider a landing page. Now, some of you may have already explored these. Some of you may not know what I mean, but what we're talking about is a sort of separate page that draws attention to a particular activity that you might be doing. So if you're running a particular campaign, or if you're a business and you're running a particular promotion for a particular line of consumer item, then this is about a page that draws attention to that, ties into the ads that you've had or other promotional tools, and what it's doing is driving traffic to that particular page, which ultimately helps people then take up action as a result of it. They allow you to diplomatically ask your visitor permission to do something, to contact them, send them more information, sign them up, whatever, or they participate in signing up for something themselves. For instance, signing up or downloading something for free, signing up for a campaign, all those sorts of things are all options. A lot of, my SEO guys have organised, a couple of landing pages for us. The more landing pages you have generally for SEO purposes in terms of traffic purposes is good. But again, if they're not done professionally, you need to get them. You can't just sort of whack up one yourself because it'll look like rubbish. You probably need to get some sort of, someone to do something that will work visually, that ties in with your branding. If you're at that point in terms of allocation of resources, have a think about doing that, because it's probably well worth it in terms of traffic. Consider guest contributors. Now, this is a really good one. It's, again, we talked about a little bit earlier, if you're just starting your blog, it's best to spend the majority of your time, around 75%, 70%, 2/3, roughly, publishing on relevant high traffic third-party publications or blogs, and less, around 30% of your time on your own. So this is what I'm talking about before. One of the things that I've been doing, I'd say I'm probably doing half, maybe about 40% on other publications and sort of 60% on our own content. When I first started my own business, I really went out there very aggressively, trying to get as much. I did a lot of public speaking. I did a lot of workshops. I did a lot of content on blogs, free webinars for people with other organisations. It's all part of that sort of content marketing ultimately. And now it's sort of flipped. So, my objective has been to try and get some of my content into really high traffic areas, which we've done. And I'm sure if you put your thinking caps on, you'll be able to do the same. And then over time, you change it as your audience has expanded and developed. Since it requires a lot of time and effort to create guest content, consider enlisting other contributors to your blog or to your content. Guest authors, at this point, will really help with ongoing quality content production and attract some of their own existing audience, and thus help to grow yours, which is important. So let's think for a bit about how you promote your content. You've got the building blocks in place, you've got the vision, you've got the objectives, you've done the content, you've got the blog in place, you're doing your best to do it as professionally as you possibly can. You've got your search terms in place, you've got a list of blog or content that you're hoping to write. You've got a plan, you've got a diary of content and posts that you're planning to do in coming months. How do you then promote it, which is important, because you can put it up there, but unless you're promoting it, unless people know that it exists, there's very little point. You really need to embrace, and it goes without saying, it's very obvious, it goes without saying that, the basics of social media to promote your content. First you'll need to have social sharing options in every piece of content you produce. We've all seen when we've read newspaper stories that we like, you can share them on Facebook or share them on Twitter or LinkedIn or all of those things. Sometimes people have, a lot of sharing options, and I think sometimes there's too many. But, it's very important that when those pop-ups come up, that they obviously mention you, and have sample copy that is generated when the buttons are clicked. So, a suggested, hi, I've just read this great story, why don't you, it's a must read, or whatever it is, or, join our campaign, join the blah, blah, blah campaign to blah, 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 whatever it is. Sample copy, people can choose to use that, or they can edit it. But, at least it's a starting point, and people might use it as you've just written it, which is great. In addition, you'll want to have Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn sharing buttons on all various pages of your website as well, so that, they just might go on and share that thing. If they're just going past it, they may not be in the story, they might just go in and share it. So you need to sort of have the sharing buttons at various points in your website to try and encourage that. To tell people that they've downloaded something, or that they've signed up to your newsletter, or they've liked your post. It's all about activity and showing people that they're committed, or that they've taken some sort of action, which is important. So Sorry, going backwards. So before we wrap up, this is the last slide. Before we wrap up, if anyone's got any questions, please do pop them up for us. But where do you go next? Now you've got your content and you're in great shape. Creating content that converts is all about being clear who your organisation helps and what issues the people that are reading it have. Then you create content that gets people into the funnel of becoming a stakeholder or donor or a participant in your campaign. In order to increase your supporter base or to scale that to increase your supporter base, bring in more money, bring in more members, you'll need to leverage your data, your metrics, and that's important. And you need to understand the metrics. And we've spoken about this many times on other webinars, but understanding where those people are coming from, who they are, why they're visiting you, how many minutes they're spending on your site, which pages they're going to, where they're going next, is important. Are the content marketing posts seeing more traffic but fewer conversions? Are the list posts performing better when they begin with an odd number or even number? Get to the bottom of all that stuff. Is it a list of 5 or a list of 4 or a list of 23, or is it whatever it is? Look for high level trends so that you can make smarter creation and promotion decisions going forward. And that's important. So, and the only way you get across the high level trends of your own metrics is to really utilize some of those metric tools. And in the last webinar and a couple of webinars ago, and if you can't find the link on 50 Acres TV and YouTube, please email me. But there's a number of resources for metrics out there. There's lots and lots of tools, and it's much more than just Google Analytics. There's all sorts of things that you can use to measure the traffic, the quality of the comments that you're getting, the sort of the positive overall intentions of people and what they're doing. Much more than Google Analytics allows you to do. So, if you're at that level of sophistication, think about some of those tools. If you are just starting out, Google Analytics is a absolute must, compulsory in my mind. It's free and it's fantastic, and it gives you a lot of data. But there is so much more you can do in terms of measurement to allow you to look for these high-level trends of where people are coming to from, where are they coming from, who they are. I mean, it's really interesting. I, do a lot of marketing. I want to put quite a bit of it. I'll do advertising on Twitter or Facebook or wherever. But then I have, last year I was a sponsor for a game called Polocross, which my children play, and we're the sponsor for the New South Wales team. I had a lot of traffic from that site. A lot of traffic, but I don't think I got a hell of a lot of conversions. So, it's about understanding you might be getting the traffic, but are some of those people, and it's about asking them, where have you heard about us? So when you're talking to them, or perhaps in email, this is where those surveys come in. Where have you, when you're often asked, where have you heard about us? That's where people are getting that information. It's useful for them. It's useful for you to find that out. So it's a sort of a two-way process. So there's lots and lots of high-level trends that you can tap into, and you need to just be, get out there and read about some of that metrics and the data collection stuff. As your organisation builds its following, it becomes much easier to create content that reaches more people. So as your organisation achieves greater authority, it becomes easier to become a guest blogger or contributor. I'm often asked to contribute to things. I'm asked a lot to speak at places. And that's only really because I've just put myself out there to do it in the first place. I put myself up there and I do things like these webinars. I do other things. I speak a lot at conferences and I give workshops. And as a consequence, that just all goes into the mix and it all sort of, helps. And it's the same for anything that you do. you'll be called upon to be a guest blogger or contributor by virtue of the fact that you're doing more of it yourself, or your organisation's doing more of it. So the more you do, the more it'll come back to you to ask you to contribute in that way. So if anyone doesn't have a question, then please pop it up. Otherwise, that is our final slide for today. Our next webinar is on November the 17th at 11 a.m, how to organise and publicise amazing events. I thought on the run up to Christmas, it's probably a good idea to have a think about how you can promote your events. A lot of people are doing events over the Christmas, January sort of break, particularly in December. So, I mean, I know we're doing one. So, can give you some ideas in terms of how not-for-profits might do them, or organisations, or indeed SMEs and corporates. So we do a lot of events, and that's what we'll be talking about next month. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This recording will be up on YouTube a little bit later today, and you'll all be sent the slides of today's webinar as well. So thanks so much for joining us. Have a great rest of the day, and thank you again for joining today's 50 Acres Academy webinar.